and welcome to Your Call. It's the only show on Indian television where you, the viewer, can ask your question directly to the newsmaker of the week. Tonight, in his first interview in India, the man who has very big shoes to fill, Dr. Lobsang Sangay, the Kalon Tripa, or Prime Minister of the Tibetan government in exile. It's a role just recently vacated by the Dalai Lama, and Mr. Sangay joins us tonight. Thank you so much for coming in. Let's just look, sir, first at the highlights of your life and career. Dr. Sangay, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And it's a role which is a huge challenge. The Dalai Lama is, of course, still the religious head of the Tibetan people. You've just been to Dharamshala, your visit after you were elected as Kalon Tripa. What are people asking you? Because we know, especially amongst the younger people in the Tibetan community, there is an expectation that we should be looking for Tibetan independence. What are people asking you? What is the expectation of you?
You know, last year I traveled quite a lot, mainly within India. I met around 30,000 Tibetans personally, and had a lot of debates and dialogues and discussions, shared my ideas. Almost unanimously, what they say is, number one, I should, serve His Holiness Dalai Lama well. Number two, I should do my best to restore freedom in Tibet, restore dignity and identity of the Tibetan people. These are the two key demands. Having said that, I do acknowledge, yes, younger generation, wants independence, and Tibetan Youth Congress and others are on record saying that, and I've been a former member of this organization as well. But I stood for the middle way, which means to seek genuine autonomy within China or within the framework of the Chinese constitution, which is the stated policy of the Tibetan government or Tibetan administration, and I, as the elected head of the administration, must fulfill that policy, and I intend to do so.
It's interesting because, of course, as a young activist, a Tibetan activist on the streets of Delhi, you also marched for independence for Tibet, and your father, a former monk, your family has had such a prominent role to play in the whole Tibetan freedom struggle. How did your views change? I mean, we know, of course, the Dalai Lama, when some years ago he made that shift, many thought it may be a betrayal. How did your views change personally?
You're right. My father was a freedom fighter. He was a monk, joined guerrilla movement. He fought against the Chinese. In fact, one of his sisters, could not bear the weekly humiliation during what we call cultural revolution, because she was associated with quote-unquote rebel. And she committed suicide. She was pregnant and she had infant child, and she had, I think he was 3 or 4 years old at that time. So yes, my family has a legacy of being freedom fighters, like many other Tibetans. And then, yes, I marched in the streets of Delhi in front of the Chinese embassy, and I visited Chanakya police station a few times myself. And yes, but Churchill said best, actually. He said, when you're young, if you're not liberal, then you don't have heart. And when you're old, if you're not conservative, then you don't have head. I think I'm somewhere in the middle.
Well, you're not old yet. You're in your 40s, so you're definitely still young.
But I think I'm right in the middle, you see. I have both head and the heart. So I do subscribe to His Holiness' view on middle way policy. And this is the stated policy of the Tibetan government exile as well.
Right.
And so it evolved over time, yes, but that's where I am now.
Well, I'm just going to go across to Dharamshala, where we have some of the people of whom you're now the Prime Minister, to ask you a question. Let's just see what they have to say in Dharamshala.
The Chinese government, from the Chinese government side, they have said that they will not meet you in future. Besides, they will contact or meet with His Holiness and Vice. And do you have any special consideration or special steps on this regard?
I'm yet to be inaugurated, but some of the hardliners in China have already started issuing statements and labeling me in some ways. which is really sad, unfortunate. It is not helpful in creating conducive atmosphere for peaceful dialogue to resolve the issue of Tibet. And these statements are coming from one particular department called United Front, which is the ministry-level department which handles Tibet. Unfortunately, the officials of that department are acting like, feudal lords, and they treat Tibet like their fiefdom. Just
NDTV's cricket app, Android and iPhone, fastest scorecard, special analysis, and much more. Download free. NDTV.com/apps.